So I'm going to be addressing the idea that WWE needs to return to the Attitude Era in order to be successful again, and why that mindset is nothing but nostalgia talk. And there went the half of my audience that either doesn't care about wrestling, or refuses to admit that any era of wrestling has positive and negative traits that are worth examining critically and not just what's currently on air. But whatever, since a good half of what I'm doing is preaching to the choir, let's preach, shall we? So the first argument for the Attitude Era I want to address is the ratings, since that is the most common complaint. Yes, they are lower now than they were in the Attitude Era. Does this mean that it's less popular than it was? Well, partially. You see, the one thing people seem to forget about the Attitude Era was what was different about the environment of creating live entertainment and television from what's true today. So, first of all, let's take a look at the technology that didn't exist during the Attitude Era. High-speed internet. I mean, it technically did exist, sure, but like most new technology, it was expensive as fuck and most people didn't have it. There were also very few, if any, platforms for delivering media content outside of still images. If you wanted quality television shows, you had to buy the VHS, or maybe the DVD if you just so happened to have a DVD player back then. In other words, those who complain that what's on today isn't must-see TV while the Attitude Era was, seem to forget that the reason the concept must-see TV was a thing was because it was much more difficult to watch what you wanted if you weren't there to watch it yourself. Even more difficult than that if you had to pick and choose between more than one show, which is really relevant considering the fact that the standard of WWE programming being able to beat Monday Night Football and having Nielsen's rating as high as the 8 is really based on having far fewer options to choose from. Don't believe me? Look at this chart and get that fucking Nickelback song out of your fucking head. This shows changes in television viewership since 2011 among 18 to 24-year-olds. That's just since 2011, by the way. Lord knows the changes were more extreme if we're going all the way back to 2000. 18 to 24-year-olds are the core demographic of television viewers, and definitely the core demographic of professional wrestling. These numbers do not specifically represent professional wrestling, they represent television as a whole, which is why they are important in noting that the failings of the current generation aren't entirely on the current generation. If you look at the information on how that data was collected, you'll see that this does not include things like a Roku box or Netflix, which WWE also has to contend with. It also doesn't measure Hulu viewership, which is actually somewhere that people can watch truncated versions of Raw and SmackDown the next day at their leisure. Another option that was not available during the Attitude Era. Of course, this only reflects 18 to 24-year-olds and has little to do with both those above and below that demographic. Not to mention the fact that Nielsen's rating system measures specifically 18 to 49 ratings, which means that at the very least an older demographic than this should be taken into consideration. Well, those who are above 24 years old also have access to things like a Roku box or, computers and tablets and shit, to watch programming outside of traditional television. A study from 2014 already shows this to be more true in 25 to 44-year-olds than with live television being viewed by those outside of the Nielsen's 18 to 49 rating range. It also shows that streaming among the three age demographics that make up the 18 to 44-year-old market is more common than both live TV and DVR overall, with DVR at a close second. At this point, the only counter argument I can see about this whole ratings thing being a moot point is that no one is making must-see TV, therefore that's why live TV is failing. That, however, really just amounts to saying things were better back in my day instead of maybe accepting that society isn't going to stop where you want it to stop. I intended for this video to cover more topics than just the ratings argument, like the argument that no one has an interesting character, or the argument that no one cares about the actual wrestling and only watches for the storylines, or the argument that it's bad because it's TV PG, but fuck, considering how much there is to talk about, let's just call this part 1, okay?